Go on, my friends. I'm Rick, and this is your seat at the table, right? I'm currently sitting at a place called Freedom Coffee. It is off of Hickman, not too far from Broadlawns, the county hospital. This is the near north side of Greater Des Moines. This place here is interesting, like a lot of stuff. It's like this is interesting, right? It's not new. Well, it is new to them, but it's not new to everybody. And it is interesting. Freedom Coffee, specifically, is run by a charitable organization. So, this job we're doing today, my boss will knock off about 70% of the bill as a charitable donation to them, and in order, so he can cover that on his taxes next year, I guess. Anyway, what they do is they take inner city youth and they put them in a commercial setting, and such as a coffee house, and teach them how to run the show, how to be a manager, how to manage the books, how to become somebody more than, showing them that you can be more than just a server or a kitchen help at a restaurant or something, as an example. Anyway, so this was going around. Ginny D, for example, did the forward on this, and she ran a couple videos on it and recommended everybody should buy a copy. I watched her video and I watched a couple other videos, and I thought, I'm interested. Let me buy this book and read it and see if it's worth having. So what we have here is the Game Master's Handbook of Proactive Role Playing. Guidelines and strategies for running PC-driven narratives in 5e adventures. Jonah and Tristan Fischel, right? So we have the afterword by Jeff Ashworth and the forward by Ginny D, right? Or Ginny D, however the hell she wants to pronounce it. So the base concept here is, in the old school way of doing things is commonly a railroad, right? This is where we're going to have to establish the who, what, why, and where. In a lot of aspects, it's a plot. The GM creates a plot, and the players go through it, right? Now, what they suggest in here, and they show there's a whole lot of case studies in here to kind of back up what they're saying. So they did their homework. They did a lot of effort to put their thoughts in order, and I'm not knocking them on that. I think it's a great book, and if you're new to the hobby, this is a good thing to pick up and start with. I think after you pick your core books up, this is not a bad purchase to have. If you're an old school hat type person like me, you decide whether you think you should need it or not. Now, currently it is in the low 80s here. It's humid as all F outside. The downside is I got to turn the truck off in order for you to hear me over the damn, because this thing's not very loud. And that means I'm going to be sweating for a minute. And I've got the fans, but I'm leery turning them too much because I don't know how much more that's going to drown out me. Because, I know I can be drowned out, but I'm also a bombastic a-hole that can ramp up when I need to. I just don't like doing it that often. It's kind of, I don't know. Anyhow, so the concept basically in here is that you get together. In a way, this is pre-session 0. Or this is session 0 expanded or advanced, depending on how you want to look at it. So you're going to go to your players, and you're going to ask your players, you're going to tap your players to create the world that they're going to play in. They should have as much input as possible in the what, where, why, and how, shy of the mechanics of the system. So when we're talking creating your sandbox, for example, then the players should have goals. And if you think about this, especially you old school hats like myself, if you go back to the very early days, the basics, and one of the the early ways to kind of affect the environment is your backstory. And there's a lot of love and hate with backstories, and I'm not going to go into a bunch of a big ramble on that on this particular video. I don't remember if I've done one on backstories or not. I very may well have. I've got over 1,000 damn videos on this channel. Just in case you ain't found enough something you didn't like, there's always something else on there you might like. Anyway, the idea being is that you create your characters for the old days. You'd have a character backstory. And some dungeon masters, some game masters would exploit those backgrounds, because it would allow you to have an expanded interaction with your sandbox. What I mean by that is they quantify it much better than I am in here. So this is why I'm saying the book would be worth having if you really want to get their gist on it. So your backstory for your character, for example, might include the hometown you came from, maybe the reason why you became an adventurer in the first place. Maybe there's a reason you became a rogue, or you became a wizard, or you became a whatever, right? And in the process of doing so, you're helping to establish what is the environment around your character, where your character came from. So you can tap that stuff. In this case, the players would then be encouraged to expand on that. What about the region? What about factions? What about goals? See, now there's a separate chapter on player goals. So the players are to be encouraged to have goals. And not all goals have to coincide with everybody at the table. You can have personal goals. And in this kind of setting, that's actually, kind of encouraged. So you would have the ability to, or you would have, as a player, you would help form the sandbox environment that you're going to participate in. This takes a lot of the load off of the dungeon master, the game master's shoulders, without a doubt, because now the game master doesn't need to focus on the framework. They just have to focus on the specifics, maybe even potentially what may or may not be drama. So we not only stop with there. So Jenny D did a video, and she encouraged her. She started with the gods for her world. She wanted her players to, install their own gods and help create them, which is fine. I mean, that's the route you want to go. Knock yourself out. And so when I look at the stuff that's going on, the more your players are engaged at the table, the more they're going to look forward to coming back to the table. That's part of the whole gist of being a good GM, is not to be the master manipulator or the grand entertainer, but to be consistently inventive and to constantly encourage input and interaction by and of your players. So we break it down. It breaks into part one, creating proactive characters, character goals, factions that your characters, these are both NPCs, they're always in, factions are NPCs. Your character may be a member of a faction. For example, perhaps your character is a rogue, and you're a first level rogue, granted, but you started out more likely on the streets as an urchin, either, doing odd jobs for the local, rogues or thieves guild or whatever, or being trained by them outright. So this creates a faction. Now, how big is that faction? How influential is that faction? How far-reaching are their ability to reach out and touch somebody? And then the GM can then take that faction and find creative and interesting ways to apply it to the setting, without having had done all the work and necessary grunt work of coming up with a faction in the first place. So if you add that to the opposite side of that, where you can have players that say, well, there was this great, whatever group or this guild or something. Well, they're going to include that into the world building stage of your session 0 or multiple session 0s, I guess, depending on how long you want to take this. Chapter 3 is non-player characters. Once again, NPCs. Now, if you go to just about any person, you yourself, who do you know? Aside from family, name 5 people you can go to with a problem. Whether it's just to get advice, to get assistance, to get information, to get, mechanical work. Somebody to come help you actually do something. Those would be considered NPCs in our role-playing sandbox. So your players could each come up with a half dozen or a handful of them, and then you, as the GM, can then incorporate them into the setting as they should crop up. And we want to be careful. You don't want to get on that one person who seems to know 300 people for, a person for every problem kind of situation. Then we go to part 2, creating a proactive world. Locations, conflict, rewards. So once again, you engage your players early on in the beginning to say, okay, so we're going to have a sandbox. What kind of environment would you like to be involved in? Do you want it to be in the jungle, in the wilderness, in the city? Do you want to have a heavily populated world, a lightly populated world? Do you want to have magic be dominant, where the magic is the technology when it's quite common, or you want magic to be extremely rare and quite mysterious? But that's all stuff the players should come up with for the table. And if that means they have to have a little round robin until they all agree on the same page, but they're engaging in and participating in creation of the very game they're going to play in from the floor up. And this is always a good thing to do. And for a lot of older players, if you've been GMing as long as I have, you've done all this stuff at some point or another. You have made every attempt to engage your players to do all this stuff at some point or another. I'm not saying everybody does that, but a lot of us do. That's why I often, or somewhat often, refer myself to as the lazy DM. And the reason why I consider it lazy is because I've learned the hard way. I don't need to spend 14 or 15 hours a week just concocting the backstories for some handful of NPCs that may or may not see any kind of FaceTime on the table. I don't have to worry about creating an entire game sandbox, entire country from scratch. And we've all done it. If you've been a GM long enough, you've made that attempt. You've crossed that bridge at some point, because that's what we do, right? And like I said, it's what I turned the damn engine on, but you wouldn't be able to hear nothing but because the transmission box is literally like 2 feet below you, where the camera is sitting at the moment. So conflict. Once again, engage the players early on to determine what's the level of conflict that they would like. And how can we manipulate, or how can we establish that conflict in such a manner that it applies to some factions and not others, and how do they interact? All this should be and can be created by the player, the entire group at the table. That's the one caveat in here I think I would have added in there, being that sometimes we tend to forget, or it's a given, that the person playing the storyteller, the story master, the game master, the dungeon master, whatever you like to call it, ought to take into account that they too are a player. They too are participating for fun. We do this for fun, to entertain ourselves, to engage ourselves, to step out of our current crappy lifestyle for a moment. Trust me, I never spent my entire lifetime thinking, gee, I want to do what I'm doing right now for a living. It just kind of worked out that way, right? I'm just saying the obvious, what it is. And then rewards. Have the players determine what is good reward. I mean, how do we allot experience? Do we want it case by case, event by event, encounter by encounter? Do we want a milestone? You want to use the milestone system? Are you using a game system that has a completely different style or no style at all? I have played a couple of game systems that do not have what you would consider experience. In the traditional RPG version of how do I advance my character, there are actually some game systems where you don't. Your game character is pretty much established when you start playing. There's not a lot of room for you to go back to the academy or to find a new sensei or whatever, unless you've already pre-built that into your game setting in your game world. Then we get into part 3, running a proactive game. Chapter 7, encounters. Chapter 8, plundering in Pine Hollow, a proactive one-shot adventure. So this roughly 230 pages, 234 pages, and it's hard for me to show it to you. I mean, there's a lot of good information in here, lots of useful little tips and applications and some stuff to consider, right? One of the sections in here that they went into and did a little extra work on is character bases and operations. So what they mean by that is, so a character's base is a staple of many TTRPGs. Once a group accrues enough wealth, power, and influence, the base is a perfect way to display it. To allow them to defend themselves, stake political power, gain followers, and more importantly, give them something they care about. Right? So there's a lot of good stuff in here, and I expect I might tap this for ideas down the road. I paid $15 for it plus shipping and handling, if I remember right. Excuse me. I'm coming down off of a nasty cold. I had a sinus infection or something over the weekend. It just laid me on the floor. It was pretty bad, and I went to the urgent care on Sunday. They gave me antibiotics. I didn't have a fever. It's not COVID, but I was starting to develop mucus in my lungs, and from past experience, a lot of experience, if I'm not careful, it turns to bronchitis, and then I'm really at a risk for bronchitis turning into pneumonia. And I've had pneumonia bad enough it laid me up in the hospital for a week and another week outside on recovering from it. So it's not something to play with. And once I start hearing that rasping stuff going on, it's time to hit the doctor's office. And they didn't tell me I needed to follow up with another doctor's appointment, but man, this is my first full day of work back since I was laid out. It really hurt me financially, I can tell you that. I was supposed to do a 11, 12-hour job Sunday night. I'm going to have to do that tomorrow night, and which meant I had a tomorrow night job that's getting moved back further because it's just kind of the way it goes. And then I had a whole pile of jobs on Tuesday that didn't get done. I've managed to get at least one of them fit in today. The rest of them I'm going to have to fit in over the next 2 weeks. It just kind of plays out. We're coming into a busier month, which is always good for me financially. But for now it's a mad dash to get as many hours as I can today and tomorrow. So I'm shooting for 12 today, and I'll have 4 in the morning, and then I'll do another 11, 12-hour overnight tomorrow night. So hopefully 35 hours. I'm still going to fall short of. I really need about 45 hours a week minimum to make sure that we cover all of our expenses, and then there's really nothing left over at that point. Any overtime I can get beyond that is the money I use to save, to pay bills, deeper bills I owe a lot of money on, to pay stuff down like my credit cards, and also to occasionally to purchase something. You know, I mean, I don't buy a lot of stuff compared to what I used to do 30 years ago. I mean, my priorities have long since changed. I mean, like I said, I picked up this at JCD and Hobby last month. It was on the discount bookshelf, and I got it for $25. So it's not much cheaper than what it would have been brand new, but it's one I don't have. You know, it's not one, I don't know why I don't have it, other than I just wasn't in a buying situation the year it came out. I think kind of the way it goes. But if you can Google this, you can look up some of this stuff. There's a lot of videos on it too. And once again, if I remember, I will post a link or two to Jenny D's video on it, and some of the other videos. If I forget, please remind me in the comments. By all means, I'm going to I'm going to cancel this video right now. Call it a day. Well, I'm going to end the video so I can turn the AC back on for a while, because I got another video I want to do, and I'm trying to get a couple videos done. I wanted to do videos this weekend, but I was just too sick to do it. I had a terrible cough, and I'm still dealing with a problem, because one of the side effects of this was I had a terrible nosebleed. It bled 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes to get it to stop. And Sunday, I had it break out 3 times. Every time I sneezed, it'd start bleeding. And so I've had to sneeze with my mouth open, which everybody hates. And then even here we are, like I said, it's Thursday, well, 5 days later of antibiotics, and I'm still having issues with it. One of it is that my sinuses are constantly running, and there's a red tint in my nostril in this way. Welcome to my personal world. Like you really wanted to hear. Besides, you know what? I can say a lot of stuff at the end of the video, because very few people watch to the end. Just not that engaging, I guess. Well, that didn't stop me in the first 1,000 videos, so we're on our way to another 1,000 videos. Till next time, I'm Rick. You're not. Freedom Coffee. Hot. Have a good day.